Welcome to our Q&A with some of the important talent associated with the Queen of Hearts, Audrey Flack. My name is Laura Thielen. I'm one of the programmers for the Ashland Independent Film Festival, and it's my pleasure to welcome you. I am very excited that today we have with us producer and director Deborah Shaffer and co-director and editor Rachel Reichman, who will be joining us. We'll be talking in just a minute. I do want to remind you who are watching this, if you have questions about the film you just saw and you'd like to ask the filmmakers a question, we invite you to go to the festival's Facebook page, and in the comments section you have an opportunity to post your questions. And tomorrow Deborah and Rachel will be looking for your questions so they can answer them. So, and the festival, this virtual version of the Ashland Independent Film Festival runs May 22nd through June 14th. So there's lots of wonderful films for you to enjoy. Welcome, Deborah.
Thank
Welcome,
you.
Rachel. What a pleasure to have a chance to talk to you about a really timely, lively, rich and sensuous portrait of an artist that I have to confess I didn't know very much about. And so I was wondering, let's start by having you tell us about the origin of the project. Jump in.
Well, Laura, I have to say I'm with you because I didn't know much about Audrey's work when I met her at all. The way this project got started was I had made a film called To Be Heard. It was released in late 2010 and went on the festival circuit. And one of my partners on that film said, I've met this amazing woman, we have to make a film about her. And they had met out in Long Island, and I met her. We went out for coffee, all of us. And the only way I can describe it really is I fell in love with her. And she was such a good storyteller. She had such a compelling story to tell, and she told it so well. Even in a coffee shop in an afternoon, she pretty much gave me her whole story, and I thought, there's material for a film. I did not know her work then very much, and this is where Rachel comes in, because Rachel and I had worked together in the past on, a public television project about women in Rwanda, some other sort of more work for hire films about women's issues, but we hadn't seen each other in maybe 10 years or something but I, loved working with her as an editor, and I called her, and I didn't know when I hired Rachel and she started working on the film that she A, had studied art history, and B, I'll let Rachel say the next part.
Well, actually, this is interesting. I love Deb's work, and To Be Heard, which was the film she'd made probably, I guess, before this, right? I had gotten to see it, and it's such a special, extraordinary film. I was a huge, huge fan of that, and we stayed friendly. In any event, Deb asked me about working on this. There were aspects to it that were a little unfixed. Deb had an idea vaguely how long it was going to be, and it was shorter than a feature, and I thought, why bother? And then also, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to give away all my reservations, but it's not, so I began by working on some fundraising aspects of the project with Deb, and was wrapping up some other things, and the thing that was actually the piece of it that I think Deb is alluding to is I had been crazy about Audrey's work when I was 16, which is a long, long time ago. And basically, like everything when you're 16, you fall in love with it. It's a mad crush. And you think that, you're going to do photorealist painting too, which you do for maybe a month or two. And then you move on to your next obsession. And I basically forgot about Audrey. And it was really, really interesting. Just the small pieces of it that I dug into at the very beginning of Deb inviting me to kind of help them fundraise and start working out some ideas before I signed on for the project. I began to be seduced by it as well. Well, actually, I'll just say the last thing is though I'm not, I went to an art school, I did study filmmaking, but my background was immersed in art because my mom was an art teacher. And so I spent most of my childhood, instead of a babysitter, I hung out at the art museum.
That's an excellent babysitter. Deborah, did you want to add something to that?
Well, I mean, there's many things, but to follow up on what, one of the things that Rachel really brought to the project, and one of the things that I think is all the art history, is all the references to where Audrey's place is in the second half of the 20th century, in the struggles of women artists in the 70s and 80s, who were the other artists, who was important, where did she fit in the array, and the comparisons with other artists. And a lot of that Rachel started as the editor and became the co-director because those are the things she really brought.
Oh, interesting. So you came on as the editor, but then you became a directing collaborator. One of the things that it is kind of, I went back to watch the film again the other day, and I was sort of like, what do you mean it's only 75 minutes? Because it's so rich there's so much information, and you cover the arc of contemporary art history. You cover her extremely eclectic art career. You cover her personal life. I'm wondering if you could, one of the things that really strikes me about the film is it's not only about this artistic legacy, but it's also this very moving and intimate personal legacy. And I'm wondering if you could talk about how you found the structure for the film. Was it something that you knew from the well, you wouldn't know from the get-go, but I'm just curious, where did you find it?
With a great deal of difficulty. With a great deal. I don't think we could have articulated all those things you just said when we started, not in any way, shape, or form. I mean, we knew Audrey had a great personal story, and we knew she had an art history story, but I don't think I could have I'm also not that kind of filmmaker. I mean, I think Rachel was frustrated sometimes in the beginning because I wasn't handing her a script with selects to, let's assemble these bites, let's take the transcripts and do a paper cut. I always I sort of wade through the material endlessly in the beginning, and it's very time consuming and can be really frustrating. But we really had to find the film, and I mean, Rachel can talk more about this too, but until very close to the end, I swear to you, we had a really boring film. And I believe I'm very proud of the film. I think it's moving and wonderful. And the things, part of what you just said about it, that it's art history and it's personal. It's partly, in some ways, unfortunately, also it's in a funny way making it hard for us to distribute, because the art people, it's too personal for the art world. It's crazy what's going on. But we wanted a film. My bottom line, always making a film, all films, documentaries, fiction, everything, they have to be films. They have to move you. They have to grab you. You have to care about the people you're watching. And all the rest of it comes after that. How much history, how much personal, it all has to be subsumed to, are you telling a good story, a moving story, a human story, a story people are going to take something from. And we had to find that. And it was not easy. We struggled and struggled. We had screenings. I mean, one screening I left in tears, feedback screenings. We always do this. We invite our colleagues, our respected other filmmakers and editors, and a few at a time. And, there was one that I ended up in tears. There was one that Rachel ended up in tears. I mean, we are not kidding you.
Yes.
Rachel, do you want to comment on that?
Sure, absolutely. First of all, if you don't end up in tears, you're not really showing up to make the movie. That's, there's other collaborators I've worked on some big projects with, and pretty much on every film, we both ended up yelling and crying. And, Deb and I didn't do a single bit of yelling, though. Nothing. I mean, we might have stamped our feet secretly while we were on the phone together, but without knowing it. But anyway, in terms of the story and what you're asking, which is how did we get to the shape of the film?
Yeah.
Deb was 100% right. It was I wouldn't say unwatchable, but early on, we had a 2-hour cut that we both thought was fabulous. And we brought some people, you know, we brought people who were in the film world. That was where we first needed feedback, was by other filmmakers who we knew would be honest with us. And it was very painful. They were, thankfully, they were so honest. And some were gentle, some were not gentle at all. Some were downright hostile. But we needed to hear that information, and we had to get over the stuff we were in love with. We'd spent a long time putting that 2-hour cut together, so we were losing our perspective. We got fantastic feedback, and we realized a lot of things. And, you know, the thing about structure is, there is no magic bullet. There really isn't. You know, there is no formula. You really need to wrestle with the thing. And Deb, as she says, has done it in the past in a way that's different than the way I did. I always have worked on paper, and it's partly because I've done so much broadcast stuff where you have a time constraint and you have different kind of requirements. And also I need to work on paper because I need to see, my memory isn't good enough to hold the story concretely, you know, and you know the cliche of putting up the postcards on the wall in order and rearranging them. It's also because you're tired of sitting down, so you've got to. But yeah, I'm not sure how much more I need to say, except that it sucked and then it got better.
Well, there was a trick that we came onto that I don't know who gets. It's, you know, we had to not start at the beginning. I mean, initially we started very, the only way to get a handle on the material initially is very linear. She was born, she grew up, she did this, she did that, she did. So that's part of what was wrong with it. And once we found a way to break that down and sort of start a little later in her story and then circle back and then jump forward and then circle back and bring it, that's what broke the logjam. And
one of the things that I really love is the way your film starts. It's so startling because we start with one of her images, and I don't remember which painting it is, but it's so glossy and sensuous, and you just put us in the world of the painting. And then at the very end, the last shot is her with a new canvas. And so that was, I loved how, and she had so much going on. I was wondering, in working with Audrey, and especially if you had to go from a beloved 2-hour cut down to 75 minutes, was there anything that was especially important for you to capture about her? Or is there something did she give you any parameters in terms of what kind of a story she wanted told?
Well, I think this is really interesting. Something came up with Rachel and I were talking about another film by a well-known filmmaker, a kind of biopic yesterday, and I won't say who and what, but it was a complete sort of, it was the artist had said to this filmmaker, make a film about me. And it was like, just, there was no way that I was going to, I think Audrey had been interested in having somebody do a film about her, and that's why she agreed to let me do it. But there was no way I was ever going to make anything remotely what I considered a fluff piece. I had to have complete autonomy and complete authority. And there were times when it became a little contentious during the film, because Audrey became very concerned about what I was doing. And she would say, you know, are you including this? Are you including that? And there were things I didn't include that she wanted me to. Oh, you have to include this. She's 89 now. I mean, there was a lot of material and a lot of stories and some aspects of her life that are, you know, some things we left out because we couldn't fit them, and others, whatever. And it became very funny towards the end of the film. I promised her I would show it to her before it was done. And in fact, we showed her the fine cut, like almost locked 1 week before we locked picture, which is pretty late. But I just couldn't have her, you know, it had to be our film, or it wouldn't have the kind of credibility in life it needed. But so she started saying to me, she came up with this line, because she's very clever. She kept saying, well, what's wrong with it if you won't show it to me? Something must be wrong. I'm sure something's wrong with the film if you won't show it to me. And now she loves telling that story when we go to a screening together, because the first time she saw it, I mean, even that first night and then the first public screening, she's very moved by the film. And she was just in tears at a lot with the Melissa stuff. She said it just, it's so hard for her still, as you can see in the film, her daughter. And she's very proud of the film too. She's very, very, very proud of it.
I actually wanted to ask you about that because it's kind of amazing. She's lived such a long life, and she has childhood friends that you're able to include in the film, which is beautiful. And also including really difficult parts of her personal life. I think most especially the section about the refrigerator mother. You manage this tone of capturing these difficult moments, but she never comes off as a victim. And I'm curious, in terms of the sensitivity that you had to use in terms, like the scene when you go into the home where Melissa lives. And I'm just wondering if there's anything that you learned there, or what was like how that presented to you, where it's like you didn't feel like you were filmmakers, but you were, how you manage the responsibility of that, I guess.
Well, that was something I had to really push for Audrey to give us permission to go with her to visit Melissa. She really resisted and resisted and resisted, and she I'm very persistent. I've been making films for as long as I have if I couldn't. But I wasn't persistent. And for me, it was personally an extremely moving experience, because Melissa really, there's stuff you don't see on camera. And this is where Rachel should address also, because I was very moved by it. She related to us through the camera and came up to us. And one of we had to be very careful for it not to appear exploitative in the film, on film, which is one of those things where sometimes being in the room and your experience in the room is very different than how it looks to other people later. Our experience there, the whole crew, and it was definitely, very genuine and very real, but we scaled that scene down. We toned it down. You want to address that, Rachel?
Yeah.
Well, a couple things. At one of our early, really tough screenings, when we had the film was quite long, that scene was quite long. And as Deb describes, what happened was that Melissa does come over to the film crew and engages with them, and it's funny, it's odd. There's much more of an examination of what her experience is of the whole event. And we thought it was fascinating. And we got a very bad reaction because people felt, it's funny, the word exploitative is hard for me to even wrap my head around, but that was how people felt, that we were somehow, it was a consent issue, that there was too much using her for something that she couldn't consent to. And I still don't fully get it. The last big project I worked on before this was about a young man on the spectrum. And so it is possible that my whole sensitivity around that stuff is now different than it, because I spent a year working with autistic kids on a project. In any event, it also, what I do understand intellectually was it completely threw the balance of the film. At that moment, wherever, and we also moved the existence of that scene in several different places in the film. At one point it was all the way at the end. At one point, it was much earlier than it is. And so finding the right place for it was really challenging. And the right length, because too short, one thing too much is too, but Deb and I both felt it was important to keep it in. There was suggestions we lose it, and we couldn't go that far.
I think it works, and I think it's just enough to give you a sense of the dimensions of Audrey's life and her connection with her child. I guess in terms of last question I'd have for each of you is, what is your hope for the film? You mentioned something about trying to find a distributor for it. I don't know if you want to talk about what your hope for the film and where it will go from here, or if in these quiet times of self-isolation, if you're working busily on a new project.
No new project. Well, because we're still, every now and then I feel guilty, like, oh my God, I should be starting another film. But the fact of the matter is, if I wasn't in isolation, I would be traveling with this film now. I'm supposed to be, Rachel was going to be out there. Rachel was going to Cascadia. I missed Full Frame. I missed Montreal. I would be on the road. So I'm working very, very hard on keeping up with the festivals that we were accepted to, like, doing these kinds of Zoom Q&As. Still entering festivals for the fall and even the winter. We don't know when things will go live again or if everything will pivot online, but everybody's learning more and more about how to keep this going as an online thing. So we're going to keep doing that. And I definitely would love to see the film. I'm talking to the right people in various broadcast venues and streaming places, but it's hard. I mean, and now everybody says to me when I complain about how hard it's been to sort of place this film somewhere, people say, oh, you know that art films don't sell. Well, you know that art films are really hard. And I say, no, I didn't know that. I mean, I didn't know that before I started. I don't know if it would have stopped me because, as I said, I fell in love with Audrey. That's where we started this conversation. And I said, fine, let's do it. And that's how I've made every film I've ever made, is like, that seems like a good idea. Let's do it. And then I'm like, it's too late for me to stop by the time I realize maybe I shouldn't have done this one. But it's a challenge, and I'm trying to meet it. We're trying to, solve the question of, I think actually there's potentially a window right now with digital. A lot of films are pivoting to digital theatrical. It's a new model, and there are distributors who are, everybody's learning super fast. And I think it might, in the end, it could end up being a good thing for us. We definitely want as big an audience as we can get. I think people relate to this film. I'm sure whoever's watching this, if you watch the film, we have had nothing but amazing response from our audiences. And so we have to get it to them. That's always the bottleneck, is how to get the film in front of people. Because once they see it, it does its own job.
Yeah, it does. Rachel, any current projects or anything that you want to share with about this film?
Nothing dramatic. I really needed a break. So in a crazy way, the sheltering is kind of a blessing for me, because the last couple months on the project were really intense. Noodling around on some personal stuff, talking to some people about things we could work on when the sheltering is less, because there's not a lot of shooting that can go on right now, catching up on a lot of reading. And as Deb said, we were so excited to be traveling with the film, and we had so many invitations that we were either going together to a few places or splitting up some of the others. And I am disappointed, because to me, one of the most satisfying things about filmmaking is I love connecting with the audiences. To me, that's the end of the filmmaking process. It's really satisfying. I love hearing what people connect to. We've had, unlike any other film I've ever worked on, there have been more discussions with more engaged audiences about the filmmaking process. To me, it's like I die and go to heaven. That's my idea of fun, to talk about filmmaking. So far it's been great, but I look forward to some of the other Zoom festivals, et cetera, where we will have more conversations.
And maybe I think we'll be back in theaters, hopefully late fall, next winter. We're not going to be, normally we wouldn't be able to be on the circuit, but I think there's going to be a lack of new films because people can't finish their posts, people can't start, everything's going to be slowed down. So I think it's going to give us an opportunity. I mean, it's hard and frustrating and sad, but I think there's some opportunities too.
Well, I want to thank you for a really inspiring portrait, a kind of amazing time capsule. Again, I'm in awe of everything. We didn't talk about our artwork, and there's so many beautiful aspects of the film that you have really elegantly weaved together in 75 minutes. I hope a lot of people see it, and I really hope that a lot of young people see it, because it's of a time, but it's also, she's a very contemporary woman, and really fascinating artists. So I want to thank you both for being with us today. Oh, Deborah, you wanted to say?
I want to say, because Audrey is going to be 89 in May. And she's working in her studio. She's working on new paintings. She has an Instagram account. You can search her. I think it's Audrey Flack Art. And we have a Facebook page for the film. And she is an inspiration.
Well, thank you. And for those of you who are watching, please remember to rate your experience of Queen of Hearts, Audrey Flack, and ask your questions in the comments page on the festival's Facebook page. And Deborah and Rachel will look forward to answering them. Thank you so much. Be well.
Bye.